Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the processing times, the processing timelines associated with, well, we're not discussing, actually Department of State is discussing it, which is kind of a rarity. And when they do it, my ears perk up because I kind of want to hear what's going on. I thought of making this video after reading a recent article from travel.state.gov. Article is titled Update on Worldwide Visa Operations under the subheading Backlogs and Wait Times, How We Got Here. Quoting directly, as for many service providers, the COVID-19 pandemic forced profound reductions in the department's visa processing capacity in two main ways. First, restrictions on travel to the United States and local restrictions on public places like our overseas consular waiting rooms curbed our ability to see visa applicants. As most applicants are required by U.S. law to appear in person, these restrictions forced a reduction in the number of visa applications the department could process. Yeah, I've been quick to point out in the past that, hey, a lot of this came from government insofar as governments decided to impose lockdowns and all this other kind of stuff. And yeah, on the U.S. side of the process, I think you could make that argument and say, like, yeah, look, Department of Homeland Security chose to, drastically reduce their capacity to be able to process cases due to office closures, etc. With regard to Department of State, abroad, especially in terms of embassies and consulates, they had to kind of deal with whatever the local prevailing conditions were on the ground. And so I'm a little less inclined to point the dirty end of the stick at them in the context of, well, you could have chosen to do it another way. These embassies, they are guests of the host nation, so it's a little tricky dealing with that. At the end of the day, you want to give deference to the local rules, basically, and that's, in my experience, what DOS did under the circumstances here. Quoting further, second, as revenue from the applications fees that fund visa processing operations was cut nearly in half, the department was forced to leave more than 300 overseas consular officer positions unfilled in 2020 and 2021. This further reduced the number of visa applications we could process. Yeah, again, good point. You get in this kind of negative feedback loop. You've got less cases, therefore you got less money, therefore you got less resources to process cases. And it kind of goes into a spiral, and that's not particularly good. Now, there does seem to be some hope on the horizon. Quoting further, where we are now, since COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted, we are back in business worldwide. 96% of our embassies and consulates are again interviewing visa applicants, and we are processing non-immigrant visa applications at 94% of pre-pandemic monthly averages, and immigrant visa applications at 130%. Now, okay, maybe, but boy, National Visa Center, this is me talking, National Visa Center still remains a quagmire. It's still, in my opinion, very unwieldy, not a very good site for uploading things. Frankly, I think the entire mechanism of the National Visa Center's online portal should be totally scrapped and, quite frankly, rebuilt from scratch. It needs to be, and quite frankly, should be rebuilt so that it reflects current American immigration law. The American immigration law never, because it was written in like the Eisenhower administration, never presumed this thing called the National Visa Center that would operate the way that it currently does. If you can't tell, I have my issues with NVC. But the point of this is, yeah, I do believe probably the embassies are moving faster, but the issue, especially with immigrant visas, is when's your case going to get to the embassy? That's more the issue. Quoting further, in the past 12 months, through September 30, 2022, we processed 8 million non-immigrant visas, well above our best case projections. We're well on the way to meeting and exceeding pre-pandemic visa processing capacity. That's good news. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear Department of State, as soon as this came to an end, they sort of, when the going got tough, the tough got going, they got moving, and they got things up and going. So, definitely on one level, good news, and it'll be interesting to see how this goes. As a practical matter, yeah, we're seeing cases kind of thaw out, but I'm not seeing it move faster than prior to the COVID situation, than the pandemic. So, and when I say that, they're saying it's moving at 130%. That would mean, presumably, I would be seeing 30% more cases coming through on this end than I currently am, or than I was. hard to say. The metrics on that, where do you begin to count? Do you count from the lowest doldrums when they weren't doing anything, whatever, 14 months ago? Or do you count from prior to this thing starting and compare it to now? I don't know the metrics on that. Long story short, it's good to hear the Department of State is moving forward on these and they're getting cases processed out as quick as they can.